Okay, an example of this is George Best, who was renowned for drinking alcohol and had to have a liver transplant, both of which livers before and after ruin resulting in his death, because obviously he ruined his first liver, and because of his profile, because he was a professional footballer, he was quite a donor register, and so he had that transplanted and had a new liver put in, which he also ruined, which eventually resulted in his death. Also, having an unhealthy diet can also have negative effects on football players. This is because it can lead to putting on weight. Obviously, if players are larger, they're generally less agile and their cardio isn't generally as good. Also, not varying foods in your diet means that you might not get the correct food sources required for optimum exercise. For a footballer, this might include a lack of carbs, which obviously provide a quick release source of energy, which is why players generally the night before a game, they'll have either something pasta-based or rice-based because of it's rich in carbohydrates. Finally, moving on to racism. Racism is an issue in sport which is constantly being confronted and dealt with. In football, racism is still a massive problem in different countries all over the world, in which sometimes the correct and appropriate action still isn't taken. In the Premier League, there have been a few instances in recent years in which racism has taken place by both fans and players. An example of a player who made racist remarks was Luis Suarez. Suarez racially abused Manchester United player Patrice Evra. The result of this was the FA banning Suarez for 8 games and giving him a £40,000 fine, which obviously had a massive effect on Liverpool's season because he was one of their main players and was their top goal scorer. In Eastern European countries like Bulgaria have regular racist incidents take place, the most recent of which being a Bulgarian club, Levski Sofia, whose fans took a banner which said "Say yes to racism." This was obviously mocking the governing body view of football, UEFA, which had created a well-known "Say No to Racism" campaign. They changed the logo of the UEFA to a pistol and wrote around it "UEFA Mafia." The club was then fined €19,000 and had to play 2 games behind closed doors, so obviously no fans were allowed to go, and it also lost out on money from ticket sales. But the fans at cause actually had no sanction, so they could just quite easily go back and do the same thing again. They weren't banned, they weren't fined. Currently in place to prevent racism in football, there are various campaigns like Show Racism the Red Card, Kick It Out, Football Unites, Racism Divides, and Say No to Racism.
So, in your presentation, in the cheating and deviance bit, I noticed that you didn't really say much about gamesmanship. So, is there anything you want to add about that?
Well, gamesmanship is it's almost like a form of deviance, so it's not breaking the rules, but it's bending the rules to your team's advantage. So that's more like it's legal, but it's really unsporting. So an example of that could be Luis Suarez, who in the World Cup handballed the football off the line for Uruguay, preventing a goal, which obviously gave away a penalty, and which gave Uruguay almost like a second lifeline. I think it was against Ghana. They then missed that penalty, which resulted in Uruguay going through. So that, I suppose that's classed as gamesmanship.
With the politics as well, is there anything else that the government would do or that goes on other than the funding? Because there was a lot there about the funding.
I suppose you could say the government almost has an effect because of whether players are actually entitled to play. Like in the Premier League, there's a lot of foreign players, for example, or overseas players, and it's the government who gives them work permits. So, for example, if a player was to come over to this country to play football, but they weren't given a work permit, they wouldn't be allowed to play, or they'd be classed as obviously an illegal immigrant, if you like.
Yeah. And to help with racism, is there anything that you'd do differently or think to help with it?
Well, it's something that obviously they're doing in the Premier League at the moment anyway, or, well, in the whole of the Football League. It's introducing more black managers. Like I think out of the total 92 Football League teams, there's only 3 black managers, which obviously doesn't set a very good example and sort of says a lot about how, even though it's not like the main cause of racism, it's like small effects or has an effect on it. So